I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Ana Klein. She is a CPA who, I guess I was introduced to you sort of through Instagram. You have a great presence there. I'm not sure how much we'll talk about accounting today, but I thought maybe you could start by just telling people about your background, kind of brought you into, kind of what you do now and sort of your interests going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, for having me on. I appreciate it. I love the title of the podcast, Know Your Why. We'll get into details or like why I love it so much but I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I was born and raised in Mexico, moved to the United States when I was around 13 years old. My mom married, found her love of her life here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I went from 90-degree weather to like now only having like 3 months of the year in summer. So that sucks. Yeah, so different. So I definitely get to enjoy just the 2 months. So yeah, we moved here and then I went to school, normal thing, did accounting. I always knew I wanted to be an accountant. My mom was an accountant. And it just like engraved in me. My stepdad also is in finance and I was like, this sounds fun. Let me do it. And I actually did fall in love with it. My senior year of high school, I just loved accounting, went to college. Then I got out, graduated, went to some private firm, and I hated it. I hated working for somebody else. I don't know why. I didn't like the whole, you have to be here from 9 to 5, which obviously as an entrepreneur, and I think many of your listeners and you yourself, you don't work a 9 to 5 when you're an entrepreneur, but at least you have the freedom to choose when you can work, right? And I think that's what I was looking for. So I was tired of kissing ass and I left. I was like, I'm done here. Bye. So then I went to another firm and now I became my own firm about 5 years ago. I decided to say, screw it, I'm going to go do it. But I think anyone who is in our situation who's an entrepreneur, we make it sound so easy, like, yeah, screw it. One day I made a decision, but it was definitely sleepless nights, contemplating back and forth. Was this a good idea? Is this not a good idea? Do you agree?
Oh yeah. No, I still have my W-2 job at this point, and it's I don't know that I'll ever leave it completely, but yes, the that sort of transition to from a known, steady regular paycheck to sort of being on your own and sort of having to hustle for it's a scary step to take. But so when you did that, kind of interesting that your mom's an accountant too. I don't know that I hear a lot of that, like that family background. But so when you made that transition, I think one of the things, and I've talked to other people about it on the podcast, but I feel like there's two ways to do it, right? There's the people that sort of start their business on the side, and then they sort of gradually work into, feeling comfortable with their own business, and then they quit, their regular W-2 job. And then there's the people that burn the boats and just, I'm out and I'm doing this. So what did you do?
Yeah, I definitely went the easy route where I found a contracting job that would at least help me pay my bills. And then, so I did quit my full-time job and I went as a contractor, but at least I wanted to make sure I had enough money to pay my bills. So I guess it was in the middle of those two options. I had my money secured for 3 months because it was a 3-month contract. But after that, it was pray Hail Mary and hopefully clients love me and want to come work with me.
Yeah. And I guess, at least correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of traditionally accounting is a very seasonal sort of field, right? So it's probably easy to find work in February-ish, whenever everybody's trying to get their taxes done and stuff. And I know that's not all there is to it. And I actually would love to talk a little bit about sort of all the other components that probably people don't think of. But yeah, I guess I would imagine that sort of the timing of it, right? When you when you decide to leave that safety, if you will, and kind of be on your own, if it's not the busy season, maybe that's a little more daunting than, kind of when you know that everybody needs to get, they have a deadline for their taxes.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I honestly, it was March of 2016 that I quit my job. So it was like in the middle of tax season, and I had already started like telling people on the side, like, hey, I'm gonna do taxes. But at the same time, I feel like with any entrepreneur, everyone's like, so this person's doing taxes. Like, what do they know? Right. So I would say it was definitely difficult at the beginning. And then I think you get to a level of like where you're just staggered and you can't level up. And I think every entrepreneur will feel that way. Like you're like, oh, I made it. I actually made 1 year where I made $30,000, which is not a lot, but you're like, hey, it's better than nothing.
Right.
I mean, but and then you're like, okay, how do I make go from here to here? So I think you're right. It was easier for accounting to grab clients then, but then after tax season, that's when you're like, oh my gosh, what now? So I really had to get a coach and figure out what was I going to do to survive for, the non-busy season.
Cool. Let's actually talk about that then. So you got a business coach type of, is that?
Yes, and I will always whatever. I mean, I first I remember, and I don't mind sharing these numbers because I think when we start, right? So I remember when I started, tax people came and I was charging, $100. Like, let's just pretend we're anybody, right? You're charging the least amount because you just want people to come to you. And then I was like, I'm working literally 100 hours a week. This is not what I wanted. I know I'm not pricing things correctly. There's got to be out there. And it wasn't like I could just call someone and be like, hey, so how much do you charge? And they were like, no, that's right.
Right.
So I found a coach and I remember it was $6,000. And I was like, how am I going to pay for this? Like $6,000 is a lot when I don't have steady income. And it doubled my business in 3 months. It was the best decision I've ever made. And I always tell people, whatever field you're in, go find someone who's doing the same thing and take it. It's an investment, and it was an amazing investment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an investment in yourself, and like you said, you doubled your business. And so it's like, a coach is going to do one of two things at least, if not both, in that it will effectively speed up your growth, right? So if you try to do everything on your own without any help, maybe you'll get there, but it's probably going to take a lot longer. Coach will speed that process up, and they'll probably also, sort of exponentially be able to increase your earnings like at the same time, basically, like by one perfect example, you're pricing yourself too low because you're worried about not having business, but instead you really need to, the idea is that you're pricing yourself appropriately, and then you can have the right amount of business and not be killing yourself to make that money, right?
Right. And I think just as an entrepreneur going from a 9 to 5, it's so different. So you don't really know how to market. You don't really know anything. And I think we all think when we're in a 9 to 5, like, well, if my boss can do it, I can do it. And like we forget about insurance, we forget about employees, we forget all these really important things, and the biggest stress. So honestly, anyone listening who's like in even in real estate, right? Like get a coach, like invest. You always are learning from people who are smarter than you. Like always, it's the best thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you're, you know, when you decide to go out on your own, you're not usually deciding like, oh, I just want to, whatever field it is, if it's accounting, or you're not saying, oh, I just want to do like my friend's tax returns on the side. You're talking about starting a business. So you do have to think about those things, the insurance, the employees, any of that, liability, stuff like that goes along with it. And so you have to think about that. You have to think about how you're going to scale and kind of create that growth. And so it is having someone that's done it and knows how to, sort of guide you through it. It'll just make it, it'll save you a lot of mistakes. It'll speed up the time frame. It will make it, probably substantially better. I think, if you ask anyone who has had a mentor or a coach, I feel like most any of them would say, yeah, it's the best thing I did, and would do it again in a heartbeat. So I think it's very, very recommended. So when you when you started your firm, I mean, I guess, well, let me back up. Are you focused kind of exclusively as a real estate CPA? Or are you sort of doing everything, or are you kind of really niche down on real estate?
Yeah. So when I first started, I was like telling you, like, whoever trusts me and walks in the door, like, I'm happy to take whoever, right? And then I started getting, just by accident, people started coming to me who were real estate, who had real estate. And I love numbers. And I was like, why are these people paying literally in percentage wise so much more less than my clients who are income earners? I'm like, so then I literally just started diving into real estate, everything I could find out about real estate. I mean, people, if they know who Grant Cardone is, I remember I almost spent $60,000 in some coaching program that he had. I didn't. It has worked for people, but I was like, okay, no, I don't need to do that. But I just literally was like, I need to know everything about real estate. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like 95, I can't remember the specific, but it's like 95% of wealthy people are in real estate. And I'm like, why am I not in this? Why aren't we teaching? Especially for me coming from Mexico, I'm always like, how we come here, wherever you come from as an immigrant, you come here to live this American dream that everybody talks about, right? It's like, how is it that I can teach other people and educate them? And like, if you see on my Instagram, really, it's just about education. Like, that's my why. Like, why are we working rat race like 9 to 5, everybody, especially if you're married, let's say 2 kids. I mean, I'm going on a tangent, but this is why I wanted to do real estate, because I'm like, now I can teach people that buying a duplex or buying more rentals can definitely give them the freedom down the road. But then, of course, myself, I was like, okay, I need to get into this business. And then, long story short, I realized that my grandpa in Mexico is a real estate investor himself in Mexico. I had no idea, but he would always go on trips with us, Jason. Like, he would take us to Disney, and I'm like, why doesn't this guy work? Like, why doesn't he work? And then I finally went back after I got into real estate, and he's like, yeah, he's like, this building, this building. He's like, I own it. I was like, okay, I can't wait. I was like, tell me everything. Obviously, it's so different, but I'm like, now I see the difference between that side of my grandparents versus the other side of my grandparents who had a 9 to 5. It's like the freedom that you have with your family is honestly priceless. Obviously, there's a lot of headache that goes with it, but yes. So now back to your question, is now I focus on real estate, just try to educate people. And also the tax code, it's insane. I mean, it's literally how to minimize your taxes, and it's literally written for you. You just have to have someone to help you play the game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a secret book, right? It's not like this secret book that you have to have some special key to unlock. Anybody can read the tax code, but as a person who is not a CPA and I've tried to look at it, it's like, it's too much. I would much rather have someone, use their expertise and figure those things out for me. But it speaks to the importance of, well, a couple of things. I mean, you touched on, you noticed how your real estate clients were paying so much less in taxes. And it's like, and the same thing, it's not even just the tax side of it, but the same thing for me as I've like dug more and more into the real estate world. Once you realize those benefits, it's like everybody needs to know this. I really do. I feel like it's like everybody needs to know this and start doing it in some way, whether it's active investing or passive investing. Everybody should be doing it because it's the way out of that rat race, right? It's the way that you can work in whatever job you want, in whatever capacity you want. It's not necessarily like your grandfather, I'm sure, worked very hard, but
Mm-hmm.
also got to go on trips with you. Like, it's just kind of like, it's not one or the other. You're still going to work hard. It's just you're in control of how that work looks. And so
Yeah.
it really is really freeing. So I think, yeah. And then having someone to help you kind of learn, not even learn, just take care of the tax side of it for you. I don't want to learn it. I want someone to do it for me. But it's at least knowing, having that person to form the strategies, right? Like how is it that real estate professionals are able to pay less taxes in theory, right? There are a lot of different vehicles. Some are particularly interesting to me, and maybe we can dive into that a little bit. I guess one thing I'd love to talk about, because I think it's a very cool strategy, and that's opportunity zones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I have a very sort of high level understanding, but it's a really great way to sort of minimize or avoid capital gains tax. And so I wondered if you might touch on that a little bit, or I can ask specific questions, however you think is better.
Yeah, I can give you guys a little bit of background on like of what opportunity zone fund investing is, right? So essentially, if you think about it, let's just say you have you're doing trades, like you trade in the stock market or whatnot, and you have a huge gain. That would be taxed at a capital gain rate, right? So usually prior to this opportunity zone funding and investment, what would happen is you're taxed at the capital gain rate, depending, it could be zero. Well, it depends on your tax bracket, right? So there was no way to avoid that. So whether you're trading or any other capital gains, you would be taxed at that. But then what they did was, they as in Congress, what they did was like, okay, so if you take the gains from that capital gain and invest them. So let's say you have Apple shares that you bought 18,000 years ago, and now you were sitting on 100,000 because you sold them, right? You're like, oh my gosh, what am I?
I used to like. I always.
Oh yeah, see, I always
you
do
bought
that
shares in Apple. I'm like always that. It's funny that.
But it's true. And now you're sitting on, let's say, $200,000 of a capital gain. That's a really pretty chunk of taxes. So instead, what you can do is you can take the whole entire 200K or partial and invest it in these zones called opportunity zones funds in real estate. You literally can just Google or opportunity zone funds in your wherever you are located, and then that tax, whatever tax you were going to have, it just keeps getting deferred. However, these are expiring in 2026. We don't know what's going to happen. So these were great for, I mean, they're still great. We're in 2021, but keep that in mind if you're just like partially reinvesting or like, we don't know what's going to happen. And this just touches base on make sure that whatever you got to research who you're voting for, who Congress, who the Senate is, because all these people that you vote for, depending on what your goals are, financially and fiscally, I'm not talking morally, could make, affect it. So that's the way to avoid capital gains, by investing into real estate in these zones. Obviously, opportunity zone funds are zones that are, less maintained, definitely need some money so they can rehab them and be better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's essentially, a government trying to incentivize people to invest in those areas, whether it's business or real estate investors. And so, yes, I know there's, in 2026, you're going to have to pay some level of that capital gains. There's maybe some step down. I understand on a high level, but the other thing that I think is great about it is if you hold it for 10 years, right, then there's no
tax
on the sale.
Right.
So
Correct.
as a real estate investor, that's huge, because one of the things that like most real estate investors do is they want, when they sell an asset, if they've made a whole bunch of money, they want to kind of roll, they don't want to pay all those taxes then. So a lot of people will use the 1031 exchange, which may or may not go away. That's, as you're speaking, like depending on how that vote goes, but that may or may not go away. But with the opportunity zone fund, you don't even have to worry about that. If you hold on to it for 10 years, there will be no capital gains on after the sale, right? On that.
Right. Exactly. So, but then in 2026, it's going to go away. So like, if it's not 10 years, so let's say you invest in it now, that they haven't come up with regulations of like, okay, well, you invested in 3 years or 2 years or a year. Like, it's just all up in the air. So like, it was a really great idea for people who did it when it first came out, because, you have that many more years. I think it's still a great idea, but this is where tax planning comes in. And this is where, I think a lot of people don't know the difference. We're so used to just, okay, I have to go to H&R Block on April 14th and file my taxes. And then they tell me how much I pay, and then I leave. And then, okay, that's boring. And there's nothing you can do about that. Like, you just go and get your taxes done. But this is where tax planning and tax consultation really comes in handy, because we talk about like, okay, Jason, let's see, you're sitting on 3 mil. Like, what should we do with it? Right? Like, this is where we need to play the game. And this is why people get upset at, I posted something on my Instagram the other day about our other president. It's not political. It's just like they asked him a question when the debate was happening. They asked him a question. They're like, hey, president, or he wasn't the president. He's like, why did you not pay taxes? Or how are you getting away with all these losses? And he goes, no, everybody on this panel does the same thing. they're just not as vocal about it as me. So it's like, it has nothing to do with politics. These codes have been written for ages. They all take advantage of it. Unfortunately, they're just not open about it because they don't want us to know all these. Otherwise, they would teach us in school, right? They would teach you in school how to do a tax return. They would teach you about capital gains. It's like, that's what I'm trying to open the eyes to people, that it's like, all the wealthy people do this. They take advantage of this and they play the game. So you need to make sure you level up and get to their level. If you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, part of your whole, wealth building strategy has to be tax planning, right? Because if you're working really hard, you're doing all this and you're making extra money, and then you have to give half of it away, like it's kind of defeating, right? It's like, well, why am I busting my butt to do this? And then I'm just giving it all away. Like, if I'm going to give money away, I want to give it away to charity. I want to give it to people that need it. And so it's, I think that yeah, not trying to get political, but I know what you're talking about. And I know there was, sort of big uproar about tax avoidance. And I feel like that's not the reason I would like or dislike some, you know what I mean? Like, that's not illegal or anything. Like, that's what people do. That's what people do with their wealth. And so the trick is, figure it out and do the same thing. And so, get yourself invested in real estate, get, whatever it is, meet with a CPA that knows how to plan for these situations. There's all kinds of things that when you start digging into it, you learn about it. I guess I'll ask another sort of specific, these questions are obviously like related to my life, but I know that there are tax strategies for like paying your children, right? So that you can give them some amount of money out of your business for work, and then it's essentially up to some point can be tax-free and a business write-off. Is that, I'm talking vague, but maybe you can expand on that.
Yes, of course. This is a really, people talk about this all the time. There's a lot of course, talk to your CPA. This is not advice. Like, this is just us talking, but it's a really cool strategy.
It's advice to me, maybe, but
it's advice.
Don't take,
no, but you never know. People would be like, Anna on some podcast told me. I'm like, no, I didn't. But so that's why we got to say that.
I paid my kids all my money, and now
yeah. So essentially, what happens is, if you have children who can help you in your business, doing legitimate work, right? So I get a lot of time realtors. These are like my favorite. Realtors were like, yeah, my 2-year-old, he's like part of my advertising. And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, this is where it gets tricky, right? People try to really play the game. And I'm like, okay, no, you can't do it that way. So essentially, let's just say you have rentals, right? And your kids are 8, 9 years old and you self-manage. So they come with you and they help you, whatever they're doing, whatever you want to do when you go to the property, if they're helping you in the business. So you want to pay them. So if they are under 18 years old, you can pay them up to $12,400 and not be an expense to your business, and have it to them as income without paying taxes. Now, it's a great strategy because if you have 3 kids, 12,004 times 3, 5 kids, 6 kids. Now, don't go have kids because this is a good idea. But if you already have them,
that is not a piece of advice. Don't have a bunch of kids.
Please don't
put them to work.
Exactly. Yeah, but the other cool thing is that what you can do is, let's say you have these kids and now they have income, they can start putting them into a Roth IRA or any sort of retirement that they would have. What I see my clients do is that they're like, okay, I'm going to pay my kid $12,400, but that money is, if the kids want to start soccer, you're expensing the soccer, but it's just a little more, and there's more administrative work to it.
Yeah. And so you actually brought up a really good point, because this is a question I wondered about, specifically because I live in LA. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, I said, I was like, do you know you can pay your kids out of your business? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you should pay your kids. I'm like, my kids are 2.5 and 10 weeks old. I'm like, he's like, well, kids get paid to be in advertising, right? Like if a child's in a commercial or whatever, they get paid. Sure. So that was his point. And I was like, I feel like it's a valid question, but I do think that the trick is you have to always be thinking about this from the standpoint of, what if I get audited? Is that going to like stand up in court?
Right.
And if it doesn't, are you prepared to then pay all the back tax
Exactly.
penalties and things like that? It's kind of that's maybe the thing that as you get more involved in the tax code and have more of these particular deductions and whatnot, you have to be very conscious of that.
Right. There's a difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance, right? Tax evasion gets you in jail because you're evading your tax, but avoidance is like you're just avoiding it because there's rules to do that. So paying your kids when you are a realtor and he's 2 years old, like no one's coming, that's not advertising. It'd be hard. Again, it's every time clients ask me, like, can I do this? I'm like, it depends. Like, it always depends. I was just talking to another client of mine. Oh, sorry. And um, he does a lot of advertising on YouTube. Like, he does videos and he does all these things. And he wants to get this extravagant car, like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. I'm like, okay, well, we can make it work if you use it for advertising, right? Like that's legitimate. But I'm a CPA. I'm not going to be like, yeah, let me just have a Lamborghini or a Ferrari to for what? Like, so like it depends. You can make it work. You just got to be creative.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just thinking about it from that aspect of, okay, can I, if I get audited, can I just, maybe no one ever audits you and it's fine. Like that, I'm sure people do it all the time, things on their taxes that they shouldn't, and then no one ever notices. But in reality, probably the more money you're making, the more that you're trying to avoid, the more scrutiny there's going to be about what you're actually paying in taxes. I would think. I guess I don't actually know how they run those
Yeah,
audits.
there's not really any sort of like, okay, if you do this, they're gonna come audit you. Really, the things I've seen because I've been in audits is real estate professional status. That applies to us as my clients who are realtors, and we can get into detail. We can essentially that is one of the most litigated things or like things in the IRS that gets all the time because essentially what happens is, let's just say I'm a high net worth um, earner, right? So I make $400,000 a year and I have all these rentals. Well, you can create losses through these rentals. And then what they'll say is, oh, cool, then I can buy them off against my $400,000. If you don't qualify for real estate professional status, you can't do that. People don't know the details of that, so they go ahead and do that. So that I know for sure is highly litigated. Number two is mileage. People really love to just say that they drove 38,000 miles exactly every single year. You're like, no way did you drive that. So there's apps out there for all these things. So at the end of the day, when people say, well, what if I get audited? Well, if you get audited, are you hiding anything? Because if you're not, like if you're worried about your receipt that you forgot a year ago, like who cares? But if you're hiding paying your children as an advertiser when you are a plumber, okay, well, yeah, that who cares? Like that makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah. It has to, I guess, pass pass the sniff test in terms of what, like, whoever, if you're in a tax trial, basically
Mm-hmm.
they're not stupid. Like they're going to be like, yeah, you probably didn't pay your kids, like they probably didn't do $12,000 worth of work at age 2. Like it's just,
Exactly.
it's kind of just maybe common sense and being it's, I guess, just being honest, doing it the right way, avoiding as much as you can, but doing it the right way. Yeah, real estate professional status is actually pretty interesting to me, but it's probably I know it's a very long, elaborate topic, so maybe one for another day. But it's the point is, and I think probably maybe the most important thing about people using their CPA for these planning purposes and not just showing up the beginning of the year like, here's my stuff, do my taxes. Like it's, once you start getting into this realm of really building wealth and trying to avoid some of that, you need help. You need someone to help you kind of strategize and do it ahead of time, right? So not come December 30th, you're like, what should I have done? What do I do this year to not pay so much in taxes? I guess is kind of, would you agree that's
Yes.
probably the more important focus of using your CPA wisely?
Absolutely. If anyone gets anything out of this call, is to make sure that if you have a business, I will say that if you work a W-2 job and both of you, or you're single or married, it's very hard. There's very little tax planning that can be done for people who are W-2s. So if you have a business or you have investment properties or you have cryptocurrency, you should be having a call with your CPA once a year, right? No matter what, for planning. Now, I will say this for all my fellow CPAs who may be listening, it is not my responsibility to come to you and ask you, hey, Jason, like, are you ready to have this conversation? Like, no, it's your responsibility as a taxpayer to be um, proactive and call your CPA to get this call.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like anything else, right? Once you start, you're working in your business, you have to essentially look at it from all angles and what can be most beneficial. And it's, no one's going to come, CPA is not going to come to you and ask you to tax plan. Your lawyer is not going to come to you and ask for you to work on asset protection. Like, you have to do these things, and be an advocate for yourself. So maybe we'll kind of switch gears here and go into the part where I'm going to ask you just a few questions that I like to ask every guest, and that way we don't keep you here all day talking about all the different possible tax deductions. But the first one is relevant to the title of the show. I know you touched on it a bit, but maybe you could dig in a little bit more on what is your why, kind of what drives you, why do you do what you do, and sort of where do you see that taking you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think for me, honestly, it's just time. Time is priceless. And building my business and buying rentals, and also, so there's two, right? Time for me to spend time with whatever I want to do, whatever my hobby is, whether it's volunteering, whether it's swimming, whatever your hobby is, that is my number one thing. I just want to be able to, for example, earlier today, it's a perfectly good example. I was like, you know what? I don't have a call till 3. I'm going to go by the pool and just hang out for an hour. Like, that's why I wanted to do this, and why I continue to buy property so that I can just do whatever I want when I want. But then number 2 is educating. Like, that is my thing. I think coming from a different country, knowing how good we have it here and how easy it is to get from zero to the top in the United States, like educating other people instead of complaining, like, you can do it if you work hard. So I try to be really, really open and loud about that with my followers. And I mean, if you guys follow me, you'll see that it's like, you can do it. Just don't complain. Let me educate how to get from here to here. It can be done.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like I noticed there's a lot of, people that come into the US and there's the picture of the American dream. And I feel like probably a lot of immigrants take more advantage of it than people that are born here. Right? Like,
I think so, because if you don't know anything else, how are you going to compare, right? So
we're
I think
entitled.
that's
we're it's just, I mean, it's kind of sad sometimes to see, like, there's many successful people that have immigrated into the US. There's many successful Americans too, but it's like, you can't complain about people immigrating if you're not doing the work, right? Like, you can't, like, realize that this is the
absolutely
land of opportunity, but go get the opportunity. It's just kind of crazy sometimes to me, to just the number of people that just don't do it, and it's not easy, but it's simple.
right. It's not. I mean, a perfectly good example is like during COVID, right? I mean, a lot of people got unemployment, and which is sad. Like, that I will never take away. Do you think people in Mexico got unemployment? Like, no. Do you think people in other countries? No, they didn't. So it's like, I feel like people who did get unemployment here, which is sad because they had to, pay their kids. It's like, maybe that was a time for us to realize, okay, I can't depend on my job. Like, how do I get out of this? Because if something like this were to happen, how do I do that? And people were complaining about it. And it's like, other countries didn't even get, like, they're like, oh, well, COVID, sorry. It's like just little things we take for granted. But if you've never been somewhere else, you just feel like you said, I think the word entitled is such a good thing, but also our education system is just not teaching us these things, right? They teach you, like, go to school, work for someone else, put into your 401k. It's like, okay, when I'm 70, like that's not gonna how I need a lot of money to live by the time I'm 70. And when do you spend time with your family? That's huge thing difference between Mexico and here. Here you work to live. That no, yes, you work all the time, right? In Mexico, you spend time with your family, like you work, but at night you're hanging out with your friends and your family because that's really important. Here, like the culture is always like work, 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 work. And it's like, wait, I forgot to call my mom. It's been a year since I've talked to my brother. It's been a year since I've talked to my sister. I'm like, how? Because we're so used to just if you work hard and you have a 9 to 5, you're set. And that's not true.
Yeah. No, I mean, it like basically what you just said is exactly why I started this podcast, because that was me. I was like, I just need to work more. I'll work more. We'll have more money. Somehow that makes things better. I don't really like, I was pretty happy when I was young. We didn't have any money. So I don't really like, you just get in that, like, you get in that mindset or game of like, well, if I work a little bit more, then we can have a little bit bigger house or whatever, whatever it is. And then it was like, my kids came along and I was just like, no, I don't, I want to see them. Like, and I don't want to see them when I'm 65. I want to see them now and like be there for the sports and the recitals and the whatever they want to do. Like, I just want to be there and be a part of it. And so, yeah, you're 100% right. It's just, a thing that we overlook in the culture of, sort of just working and not realizing that there's ways to maximize that income that you're making so that you don't have to, like, it's actually easier to grow your income by becoming an investor and using these tax strategies and things than it is to work more, because you talked about at the beginning, if you're charging not enough and the only way you can make more money is by doing more returns, like it's just this endless cycle that it's not sustainable. So yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think it's that, once you figure that out, it's really kind of life-changing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, well, tell us something about you that people don't know. What do you like to do in this time that you have, this time freedom that you have, or maybe it's a special skill or something like that?
That's a good question. Actually, I've been really getting into reading about politics and like our history. So just like with all the turmoil that's been happening and like the division in our country, that's like the one thing that I'm like, okay, I want to learn more about why people act this way or why people are like this. So I think like many of us, we're so privileged to just have lived in this little box of this is what we know. And if it doesn't fit this box culturally, socially, then it's wrong or I don't like it, right? Or it's like, oh, that's weird. So lately I'm like, you know what? Let's figure something else out. Let's be more educated. So I think reading is something that has I've gotten into it. Usually I would read just like, I don't know, anything for fun, but I'm like, let me actually stimulate my brain.
Yeah, right. Learn something while you're reading. Yeah, no,
Yes.
that's great. Yeah, I like to stay away from politics, but it probably would help to be more educated about it, I suppose. That's a good idea. You touched on a little bit. How can people reach you? I know you have a pretty good presence on Instagram, but in terms of if people want to talk to you, if they want to reach out and become a client, how would you? And we'll get everything in the show notes. But what's the best avenues for that?
Yeah, so the best is to head on over to my Instagram, which is Ana K CPA, which I think you'll put there as one N. And there's a little link to our questionnaire. So essentially, we want to make sure it makes sense for both of us to work together. So you fill out the questionnaire if you have properties, and someone will reach out so we can schedule a consultation with you to see if it makes sense to work together.
Awesome. Sounds good. And yeah, and people should check out your Instagram also just for the educational, like we were saying, you have a lot of just, I feel like very practical tips that are good. Okay, one last question, Anna. What piece of advice would you give to people? Doesn't have to be tax related, just in terms of, sort of getting ahead in life, achieving in whatever that means, whether it doesn't necessarily have to even be financial achievement, just, life happiness, or what's your piece of advice?
Definitely always say is don't make excuses, stop blaming other people, and just do it. I think that's how I was brought up, where it's like if you want to get from point A to point B, whatever it is, whether it's financially, emotionally, in a relationship, whatever it is, it's like stop making excuses. Like no one cares, really. Nobody cares about your excuses. Like just get to point B and just do the work.
Yeah.
I have no sympathy for that.
And I mean, people might care, but that's not going to fix it for you, right?
Right, exactly, right.
You might have friends that are like, yeah, I'm sorry, but still, like, you're in this, like, just get out of that victim mentality and go ahead and do it, make it happen, because like literally anyone can do it. Like if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like it's that simple. Like I think there's no reason, there are obstacles, but they are surmountable.
Absolutely, I agree.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate having you on. I think that was very helpful for people in a lot of ways, and I think people would be smart to reach out to you. I think if you already have a CPA, just again, being proactive in handling your own sort of financial situation and tax status.
Yeah, and if anything, if you do have a CPA that you like, it's always good to bring up to them like, hey, I heard this on this, or it's like, we're also not wizards, like we don't know everything, so bring it to your CPA and hopefully you can be proactive.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I guess we'll say goodbye.
Thanks,
everyone.
Jason.